Every screen inside the Grand Sapphire Resort went black at exactly 8:42 a.m. The giant LED wall behind the main stage flickered once, twice. Then a single line of crimson text appeared across every monitor in the building. Your network belongs to us. The ballroom fell silent. More than 500 executives, investors, and technology leaders stared at the screens as if the words might disappear if they waited long enough. They didn't. One by one, phones lost service. Credit card terminals froze. Digital room keys stopped responding. Somewhere upstairs, elevators locked between floors. Panic spread faster than the malware itself. Security officers rushed toward the control room. IT engineers shouted over one another. Executives demanded answers nobody had. And outside, a black man in a faded blue maintenance shirt calmly skimmed a handful of maple leaves from the surface of the resort's infinity pool. He looked up only after hearing the alarm. For a brief moment, he watched employees sprint across the courtyard. Then he lowered the skimmer back into the water and finished clearing the last few leaves. He knew something everyone else didn't. 20 minutes from now, the people running this $200 million resort would discover they had spent months ignoring the only man capable of saving it. If you've ever watched someone be judged by their uniform instead of their character, stay with this story. Because what happened next changed far more than a computer network. 12 hours earlier, at 5 o'clock every morning, Micky's apartment came to life before the rest of the city. Not because of an alarm clock. Because of routine. Routine was how he kept grief from taking over. The coffee maker clicked on while the sky outside was still dark. A skillet warmed over low heat. Bacon sizzled quietly beside scrambled eggs. By the time the smell drifted down the hallway, a bedroom door opened. "Dad, I'm in the kitchen." 9-year-old Ethan shuffled into the room, rubbing one eye while dragging a backpack nearly as large as he was. His hair refused to stay flat, no matter how much water he used. Micky smiled. "Morning, buddy." "Morning." No matter how tired he looked, Ethan never forgot the same ritual. He reached into the front pocket of his backpack and carefully pulled out a small brass compass. The metal had faded with age. Tiny scratches covered its surface. Inside the lid, someone had engraved one simple word. North. His mother had given it to him during her final weeks. Whenever Ethan felt nervous, whenever school became difficult, whenever he missed her, he would hold the compass for a few seconds. Not because it had any magic, because she had once told him, "When life gets confusing, don't look for shortcuts. Just remember where your true north is." Ethan spun the compass gently in his palm. The needle settled. He smiled. "Still works." "It always will," Micky said. Ethan looked up. "Even if we're lost." Micky placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "The compass doesn't stop people from getting lost." He paused. "It reminds them where to start finding their way again." Ethan nodded thoughtfully before slipping the compass back into his pocket. Breakfast wasn't fancy. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange slices. But every meal ended exactly the same way. The two of them cleared the table together. No television, no phones. Just quiet conversation before another day began. It had been 4 years since Ethan's mother passed away. The silence in the apartment had never completely disappeared. They had simply learned how to live beside it. By 6:30, they were already driving toward the Grand Sapphire Resort. Morning sunlight stretched across the highway. Ethan watched expensive cars pass them one after another. "Dad? Yeah? Do you think people who stay there are happy?" Micky glanced at the long line of luxury SUVs entering the resort. Some are. And the others? They're still looking. Ethan thought about that answer for nearly a minute. You always answer questions weird. Micky laughed. So I've been told. The resort appeared over the hill like something from a postcard. Palm trees, glass towers, sparkling fountains. Guests carrying designer luggage. Employees in perfectly pressed uniforms hurried between buildings, preparing for the biggest event of the year. Today, the Grand Sapphire Resort would host an international technology summit. Some of the largest companies in America had sent executives, investors, journalists, industry leaders. Everything had to be perfect. Micky parked near the employee entrance. Unlike most parents, he couldn't simply leave Ethan at home. School was closed for a teacher training day, and the resort manager had agreed that Ethan could spend the day in the children's reading lounge as long as he stayed inside the staff-approved areas. Before getting out of the truck, Ethan reached into his pocket once more. He touched the brass compass. A habit. A promise. "You'll come get me for lunch?" he asked. "I wouldn't miss it." They bumped fists. Then Ethan disappeared toward the reading room, while Micky headed in the opposite direction, carrying a long aluminum pool skimmer over one shoulder. Neither of them noticed a woman in an elegant white suit watching employees from the second-floor balcony. Her name was Helena Whitmore. She believed first impressions revealed everything worth knowing about a person. Before the day was over, she would learn how wrong she had been. By 7:30, the Grand Sapphire Resort no longer felt like a hotel. It felt like the headquarters of a Fortune 500 company. Luxury SUVs lined the entrance. Satellite news vans occupied the outer parking lot. Employees wearing headsets hurried through the marble lobby, checking schedules for the International Technology Leadership Summit. Every ballroom had been transformed into exhibition space. Robotic demonstrations occupied one wing. Artificial intelligence companies prepared product launches in another. Executives carrying six-figure contracts shook hands beneath crystal chandeliers, while photographers captured every smile. For the Grand Sapphire Resort, today's event represented months of planning and nearly $20 million in future business. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could go wrong. Micky pushed his maintenance cart across the pool deck. The morning sun reflected off the still water as he checked chlorine levels, inspected filters, and tested the circulation pumps. It was the same work he had done nearly every day for the last 3 years. Simple, honest, predictable. Most guests never noticed him. That was perfectly fine with Micky. Invisible people heard things others didn't. He was tightening a pressure valve beneath the main filtration system when a soft electronic chime echoed from a nearby control cabinet. His eyes drifted toward a touchscreen mounted inside the equipment room. Normally, it displayed pump temperatures and water pressure. Today, another small diagnostic window had appeared in one corner. A stream of network activity flashed across the screen. Most maintenance workers would have ignored it. Micky didn't. He stepped closer. Packets, authentication requests, failed login attempts. Then, another wave. Different source, different timing. His expression remained calm, but something behind his eyes sharpened. That wasn't normal traffic. Someone wasn't trying to enter the network. They were mapping it, testing doors before choosing which one to break. The activity disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. Micky stood still for another few seconds. Then he quietly closed the panel. Inside the convention center, dozens of IT engineers rushed between temporary server racks. One of them, A young technician named Kevin was reviewing network diagnostics when Micky approached. "Morning," Micky said. Kevin barely looked up. "Morning. I noticed some unusual authentication requests reaching one of the maintenance controllers." Kevin continued typing. "Probably vendors connecting equipment." "Maybe," Micky nodded. "But the timing looked coordinated." Kevin smiled politely. "The pool system isn't connected to anything important." "I understand. But it may be worth checking." Kevin finally looked up. "You work maintenance, right?" "I do. We've got cybersecurity covered." There was no anger in Kevin's voice, only confidence. The confidence of someone who had never seen a real attack. Micky offered a small smile. "I hope you're right." He turned and walked away. Kevin watched him leave before chuckling to the coworker beside him. "I guess everyone becomes an IT expert during tech conferences." The two engineers laughed softly before returning to their screens. Unfortunately, they weren't the only ones listening. Standing a few feet away, reviewing decorations with an event coordinator, was Helena Whitmore. She had heard just enough to form an opinion. She crossed the room in sharp, confident strides. Her tailored white suit looked expensive. Her posture looked even more expensive. "Micky!" He stopped immediately. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore." She folded her arms. "I hired specialists from 3 cybersecurity firms." "Yes, ma'am. They've spent months preparing for today." "Yes, so I'm curious." She smiled. "What exactly qualifies our pool caretaker to advise them?" A few nearby employees stopped working. Not obviously. Just enough to listen. Micky answered without hesitation. "I wasn't giving advice. I simply thought they might want another set of eyes." Helena laughed. Not loudly. Just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Here's another idea." She pointed toward the glass doors leading to the outdoor pool. "You take care of the water." She gestured toward the server room. "They'll take care of the computers." Several employees exchanged uncomfortable looks. Nobody said a word. Micky simply nodded. "Understood." "Good." Helena smiled with satisfaction. "We all have our lanes." She walked away without another glance. From the second-floor reading lounge, Ethan had seen everything. He couldn't hear every word through the glass, but he didn't need to. He recognized the look on his father's face. It was the same calm expression Micky wore whenever something unpleasant happened. No arguing, no anger, no embarrassment, just quiet dignity. When Micky stepped outside a few minutes later, Ethan hurried downstairs. "Dad." Micky smiled immediately. "Hey, buddy. Were you in trouble?" "No. It looked like it." Micky sat beside him on a stone bench overlooking the fountain. "Sometimes people make decisions before they know someone's story." Ethan frowned. "That's not fair." "No, it isn't. So why didn't you tell them they were wrong?" Micky looked toward the shimmering water for a moment before answering. "Because being right isn't always the most important thing." Ethan waited. "The truth has a way of introducing itself." Those words settled somewhere deep inside the boy. He reached into his pocket and wrapped his fingers around the brass compass. North. The needle remained perfectly still. Neither father nor son noticed the same black SUV pulling slowly into the service entrance behind the convention center. 2 men stepped out carrying identical hard-shell equipment cases with no company logos. They showed temporary contractor badges to security. 30 seconds later, they disappeared into the building. On a nearby rooftop, a small wireless antenna hidden inside an ordinary maintenance backpack blinked once. Then again. Far away, someone watching multiple monitors smiled. The reconnaissance phase was over. The real attack was about to begin. At precisely 9 a.m., the International Technology Leadership Summit officially began. Soft orchestral music filled the Grand Sapphire Ballroom as hundreds of guests settled into their seats. The massive LED screens came alive with the resort's logo before transitioning into a polished welcome video featuring palm trees, ocean views, and smiling employees. Everything looked flawless, exactly the way Helena Whitmore wanted it. Standing near the entrance, she watched the guests with quiet satisfaction. This conference was more than another event. If it succeeded, the Grand Sapphire Resort would become the preferred venue for several of the country's largest technology companies. Months of planning, millions of dollars, and Helena intended to receive every bit of the credit. 5 minutes until the opening remarks, one of her assistants whispered. Helena gave a confident nod. Perfect. Outside, Micky was replacing a faulty pressure sensor beneath the children's splash pool. His hands moved with practiced precision. He never rushed. Years of maintenance work had taught him one lesson above all else. The smallest overlooked problem usually became the biggest emergency. His phone vibrated, a notification from the resort's maintenance system. Pool controller offline. A second later, the warning disappeared. Micky frowned. That shouldn't happen. Equipment either failed or it didn't. Systems didn't simply disconnect and reconnect by themselves. He reopened the maintenance panel. Everything looked normal. Then, almost too quickly to notice, another burst of unusual network traffic crossed the diagnostic display. Different destination, different controller. The same pattern. Someone was moving through the network, not randomly, methodically, like a person walking through a dark house, checking every locked door before choosing one to force open. Micky quietly took out a small notebook from his back pocket. Instead of writing words, he noted 4 numbers: time, IP range, connection interval, packet count. Then he slipped the notebook away. Inside the ballroom, applause erupted as the resort's general manager stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grand Sapphire Resort. More applause followed. Journalists raised their cameras. Television crews adjusted their lenses. Everything appeared perfectly under control, until the presentation screen flickered. Just once. Most guests barely noticed. The general manager continued speaking. Behind the stage, an IT technician glanced toward his monitoring tablet. A yellow warning icon flashed. CPU usage spike. Then, it disappeared. He shrugged. Probably a temporary software hiccup. Across the resort, similar glitches began appearing. A digital room key took 3 extra seconds to respond. A self-check-in kiosk restarted without warning. One security camera froze for nearly 10 seconds before returning to normal. Nothing serious. Nothing anyone would call an emergency. Each department reported a different problem. None of them realized they were all connected. Near the outdoor cafe, Ethan sat reading a science magazine while occasionally looking up to watch his father work. He loved seeing Micky fix things. To Ethan, his dad could repair almost anything. A loose bicycle chain, a broken faucet, a leaking pipe. Even his own bad days somehow became easier after talking to him. Ethan noticed Micky staring toward the main hotel building. His father wasn't working anymore. He was watching people, watching doors, watching the rhythm of the building itself. Something felt different. Ethan closed his magazine. "Dad?" Micky turned immediately. "What's up? You've got that face." "What face?" "The one you get before something breaks." Micky smiled, despite himself. I do. You always do. For a moment, Micky considered dismissing the feeling. Instead, he crouched beside his son. Have you ever watched birds before a storm? Ethan nodded. They fly differently. Exactly. You think there's a storm coming? Micky looked toward the convention center. I think something's happening. You know what it is? No, but I know what it isn't. Ethan tilted his head. It isn't random. At 9:37 a.m., Micky walked back into the convention center. Kevin, the young IT technician, was studying several monitoring dashboards. Micky stopped beside him. The network anomalies are spreading. Kevin sighed without looking away from his screen. We've already checked. I'm not talking about equipment. Kevin finally looked up. It's under control. I don't think it is. Before Kevin could answer, Helena appeared once again. Her expression hardened the moment she saw Micky standing inside the technical operations area. I thought we had this conversation already. Micky remained calm. I only wanted to. You wanted to do someone else's job. Several nearby guests turned toward the raised voices. Helena smiled politely for their benefit before lowering her tone. This conference brings together some of the best cybersecurity professionals in the country. She glanced deliberately at Micky's maintenance uniform. They don't need advice from someone who cleans swimming pools. A few executives nearby exchanged amused smiles. One of them quietly chuckled. Micky looked directly at Helena. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. Then don't. She pointed toward the exit. Please return to your assigned duties. For a long second, nobody moved. Kevin looked uncomfortable. He remembered the certainty in Micky's voice. Not arrogance. Certainty. Still, he said nothing. Micky gave a small nod. As you wish. He turned and walked away. Helena straightened her jacket before greeting another group of arriving executives, as though nothing had happened. At exactly 9:45 a.m., hidden inside a rented office nearly 600 miles away, a man wearing headphones pressed the enter key on his keyboard. He watched dozens of encrypted connections bloom across 6 monitors. One by one, the digital doors he had quietly unlocked throughout the morning swung open. He smiled. Let's see how prepared they really are. Far inside the Grand Sapphire Resort, a tiny red light began blinking on the primary server rack. No alarms sounded. Not yet. The countdown had already begun. The first sign that something was truly wrong came just after 10 o'clock. Not in the ballroom. Not in the server room. At the resort's largest infinity pool, one of the circulation pumps unexpectedly shut itself down. Within seconds, an alert appeared on the maintenance system. Primary filtration error. Micky arrived less than a minute later. He knelt beside the equipment cabinet and opened the control panel. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Power was stable. Pressure was stable. No mechanical damage. Then he noticed something unusual. The pump hadn't failed. It had received a remote shutdown command. His eyes narrowed. That should have been impossible. The pool control network wasn't supposed to receive outside instructions, unless someone was already moving through systems that should never have been connected. Micky reset the controller manually. The pump restarted immediately. No damaged parts. No failed motor. No electrical fault. Someone, or something, had turned it off. He closed the panel slowly. This wasn't about the swimming pool anymore. Meanwhile, inside the Grand Sapphire Ballroom, Helena Whitmore welcomed another wave of VIP guests. Television cameras followed every movement. Investors posed for photographs. The atmosphere had recovered from the earlier glitches. Most people had already forgotten them. Helena intended to keep it that way. She smiled effortlessly as she escorted a group of executives toward the outdoor reception terrace overlooking the infinity pool. "This view," she said confidently, "is one of the reasons companies keep choosing Grand Sapphire." Almost on cue, the decorative waterfalls surrounding the pool suddenly stopped flowing. The fountains went silent. The gentle sound of moving water disappeared. Several guests looked around in confusion. One executive raised an eyebrow. "I thought everything here was automated." "It is," Helena answered quickly. "Probably routine maintenance." Her smile remained in place. But inside, she was furious. She spotted Micky closing the equipment cabinet. Without asking a single question, she walked straight toward him, high heels striking the stone walkway, each step sharper than the last. "Micky," he stood. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore." "What happened?" The circulation controller received an unexpected shutdown command. Helena frowned. "I asked what happened." "I don't believe this was mechanical. I'm still investigating." A few nearby guests slowed their conversations. Not enough to stare, enough to listen. Helena folded her arms. "So you're telling me our feature pool stopped working during the biggest event of the year, and you don't know why?" Micky answered honestly. "I know why the pump stopped. I don't yet know who or what issued the command." Helena let out a short laugh. "That's convenient." Several executives exchanged curious looks. One of them whispered to another. Helena noticed. She couldn't afford uncertainty. Not today. She needed someone to blame, and the man standing in front of her made the easiest target. "Ladies and gentlemen," Helena said with a practiced smile, "it appears our pool caretaker has developed a new specialty." Several guests turned toward them. "Apparently he's diagnosing cybersecurity issues now." A few people laughed politely. Micky remained silent. Helena continued. "I suppose maintaining swimming pools has become too easy." More laughter. One executive smirked. "I've heard confidence is free." Another replied quietly, "So are opinions." The group chuckled. Micky simply looked at the silent waterfall behind them. He wasn't embarrassed. He was thinking, trying to understand why someone would test a peripheral control system before attacking anything valuable. It made perfect sense. If you wanted to know how quickly defenders reacted, you started somewhere nobody considered important. From the second-floor balcony, Ethan had walked outside to get some fresh air. The moment he heard laughter, he leaned over the railing. His stomach tightened. He saw his father standing completely alone. Everyone else was smiling, not kindly. He couldn't hear every word, but he heard enough. Pool caretaker. Leave computers to professionals. Stick to what you're paid for. Ethan gripped the brass compass inside his pocket until the edges pressed into his palm. He wanted to run downstairs. He wanted to tell those people they didn't know his dad. Instead, he watched. Because his father wasn't saying anything, Helena stepped closer. "Here's what we're going to do." Her voice remained pleasant for the audience. "You'll focus on maintaining the pool. My IT department will focus on technology. My event staff will focus on the guests. And everyone will stay in their lane." She smiled. "Is that understood?" Micky met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. You'll also submit a maintenance report before lunch." "I will. And unless someone specifically asks for your opinion." She paused. "Don't offer one." For a brief second, absolute silence settled over the terrace. Micky gave one respectful nod. "I understand." Then he picked up his toolbox. Without another word, he walked away. Several employees standing nearby exchanged uneasy glances. A housekeeper quietly shook her head. That wasn't necessary. A banquet supervisor answered under his breath. She could have handled that privately. Kevin, the young IT technician, had witnessed the entire exchange from across the terrace. Something about it bothered him. Not Helena's tone. He'd seen that before. It was Micky's reaction. Most people defended themselves when accused. Some argued. Others became angry. Micky had done neither. He had simply accepted the humiliation, as if something far more important demanded his attention. Kevin looked back at his monitoring tablet. 3 new warning messages appeared almost simultaneously. Unauthorized authentication attempt. Another followed. Unknown device registered. Then another. Network time synchronization failed. Kevin frowned. His fingers froze above the keyboard. For the first time that morning, he remembered exactly what Micky had said. The timing looked coordinated. Kevin quickly opened another diagnostic window. More alerts appeared. Different systems. Same timestamp. His heartbeat accelerated. This wasn't random. Before he could call anyone, every warning on the screen disappeared, as if they had never existed. Kevin stared at the blank dashboard. A chill ran down his spine. Somewhere inside the resort, someone had just erased their own footprints. And whoever they were already much deeper inside the network than anyone realized. For nearly 20 minutes after the incident at the pool, everything seemed normal. The waterfalls were running again. Guests returned to their conversations. Music drifted through the courtyard. Waiters carried silver trays filled with champagne. Helena convinced herself the embarrassment was over. She had regained control. Or so she believed. At 10:27 a.m., Kevin sat alone in the temporary network operations room. His eyes moved rapidly across 6 monitoring screens. Everything looked stable, almost too stable. The alerts that had appeared minutes earlier were gone. No failed logins, no unauthorized devices, no abnormal traffic. Nothing. He leaned back in his chair. That's impossible. Real attacks didn't simply disappear. Neither did evidence. Unless someone had erased it. His phone rang. Kevin, a voice from ballroom security. We just lost camera 12. Only one? For now. I'll check. He opened the surveillance dashboard. Camera 12 had gone offline. 3 seconds later, camera 14 disappeared. Then 21. Then 9. The system refreshed automatically. Every camera suddenly showed online again. Kevin frowned. Something was playing with them. Testing. Measuring. Waiting. Outside, Micky was walking toward the employee cafeteria when his own maintenance tablet vibrated. Every controller connected to the resort appeared on the screen. Green. 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 Then, one after another, the icons flashed yellow. Not because the equipment was failing, because communication with the central server had become unstable. He stopped walking. His eyes scanned the display. Different buildings, different systems, exactly the same timestamp. Someone had synchronized the attack. His pulse remained steady. His mind did not. He looked toward the convention center. They're finished mapping the network, he whispered. They're ready. Inside the children's reading lounge, Ethan sat near the window, building a small model airplane from a science kit. Mrs. Reynolds, the volunteer supervising the children, smiled as she watched. You've got very steady hands. My dad says, slow hands make fewer mistakes. Your dad sounds smart. Ethan grinned. He fixes everything. Mrs. Reynolds laughed. I'm sure he does. At that exact moment, Every light inside the room flickered. Once, twice, then stabilized. Several children looked up. One little girl asked, "Was that supposed to happen?" Before anyone could answer, the electronic door lock clicked loudly. Then, locked. Across the resort, dozens of employees looked up at the same time. Digital menu boards turned black. Reception computers restarted. Guest room phones went silent. The self-check-in kiosks froze in mid-transaction. One elevator stopped between the 6th and 7th floors. Another refused to open its doors. Within seconds, confused voices filled the lobby. Back in the ballroom, the keynote speaker had just begun introducing the opening presentation. The future of artificial intelligence depends on... His microphone died. The giant LED wall behind him blinked once. The presentation vanished. Every screen turned black. The ballroom fell into uneasy silence. 500 people stared forward. A red cursor appeared. Then a line of white text slowly typed itself across every display. "Your files have been encrypted." Someone in the audience laughed nervously, assuming it was part of the presentation. No one else laughed. Another line appeared. "Do not shut down your systems." Then another. "Instructions will follow." A woman near the front whispered, "This isn't a demo." The room erupted. Phones came out. Executives stood. Security officers ran toward the exits. IT staff sprinted backstage. Helena's heart dropped into her stomach. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Kevin burst into the ballroom, carrying his laptop. "We've lost the servers." One executive grabbed him. "How long until they're back?" Kevin didn't answer, because he didn't know. He had never seen anything like this. Entire sections of the network were disappearing, not crashing. Disappearing, as though someone had reached inside the system and quietly locked every door from the inside. Outside, Micky heard the emergency alarms begin echoing across the property. He didn't run toward the ballroom. He ran somewhere else. The children's wing. His boots pounded across the stone walkway. Employees rushed in the opposite direction, all asking the same question. "What happened?" Nobody had an answer. As Micky reached the children's center, he found several parents gathered outside the locked entrance. The electronic access system had failed. Mrs. Reynolds stood inside, trying every emergency release she knew. Nothing worked. The children were beginning to panic. Through the glass, Ethan spotted his father. "Dad!" Micky immediately raised one hand. His voice stayed calm. "Ethan, I'm here." "Listen to me." The boy took one deep breath. Everything else disappeared. His father had arrived. That alone made him feel safer. "Are you hurt?" Ethan shook his head. "No." "Good. Stay exactly where you are." Micky examined the electronic lock for only a few seconds. The system wasn't responding because the building controller had frozen. Breaking the glass would frighten the children. There had to be another way. His eyes moved across the hallway. Fire safety panel. Manual override. He crossed the corridor, opened the emergency cabinet, and quickly followed the mechanical release procedure printed inside. 3 precise movements. A heavy click echoed through the hallway. The magnetic lock disengaged. Mrs. Reynolds pushed the door open. Parents rushed forward. Several hugged their children. Ethan ran straight into his father's arms. "You came. I told you I'd always come." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass compass. "I knew you would." Micky smiled faintly. "So did your mum." The reunion lasted only seconds. A security officer sprinted toward them. "Mr. Brooks." Micky turned. "The general manager needs every department head in the ballroom immediately." "I'm not a department head." "I know." The guard hesitated. They said, "If anyone understands building systems, send them." Micky looked down at Ethan. "You staying with Mrs. Reynolds?" The boy nodded. "You'll come back. I promise." Ethan squeezed the compass once before slipping it back into his pocket. "I'll be waiting." Micky stood. For the second time that morning, he walked toward the convention center. Only this time, the resort he had entered a few hours earlier no longer existed. As he stepped through the ballroom doors, every screen in the room changed once more. A countdown clock appeared beneath the ransom message. 02:59:59. 3 hours. That was all the attackers were giving them. The countdown reached 2:58:41. No one in the Grand Sapphire Ballroom was paying attention to the keynote stage anymore. The conference had become a crisis center. Executives crowded around tables, speaking into phones. Investors demanded updates. Reporters, who had arrived to cover innovation, now pointed their cameras toward frightened employees rushing through the lobby. Outside, several guests discovered their room key cards no longer worked. Inside the kitchens, digital inventory systems had frozen. The reservation platform had gone offline. Even the backup phone network had begun failing. For the first time in the resort's history, everything depended on the people inside one temporary server room, and they were losing. Kevin's fingers flew across his keyboard. Every command returned the same response. Access denied. He tried another server. The same message. Then another. Nothing. He disconnected one machine from the network. It was already encrypted. Someone beside him whispered, "How is that possible?" Kevin didn't answer. Because he was asking himself the same question. We isolated the servers. We segmented the network. We installed endpoint protection. His voice grew quieter with every sentence. So how? Nobody finished the question. The general manager stood near the center of the room with Helena and the resort's executive team. "What are our options?" he asked. The director of information technology rubbed both hands across his face. "If we had clean backups." "We don't? They're encrypted too." Silence. "What about restoring from the cloud?" "They got there first." Another silence. Finally, the IT director spoke the words no executive ever wanted to hear. "We are completely locked out." The room felt smaller. Someone cursed under his breath. Another executive slowly removed his glasses. Helena stared at the countdown clock displayed on the ballroom screen. 2:54:12. Every second seemed louder than the last. An email notification appeared on the emergency laptop. The sender contained no name. Only a string of random characters. The general manager opened it. The room held its breath. The message contained only 3 lines. "Your network is encrypted. Your backups belong to us. Transfer $8 million in cryptocurrency before the timer reaches 0. Below the message sat a digital wallet address. Nothing else. No negotiation. No explanation. Just a deadline. Helena looked around the room. "No, we are not paying criminals." The IT director spoke carefully. "If we don't, we may lose every reservation, every financial record, every customer database, possibly everything." No one argued, because everyone knew he was right. Outside the conference room, Micky stood quietly near the open doorway. No one had invited him inside. No one had asked for his opinion. He simply watched. Not the executives, not the countdown, the people. Fear had changed them. Some were angry, others panicked. A few had already begun blaming each other. Fear always looked different on the surface. Underneath, it behaved exactly the same. A young employee hurried past, carrying a box of bottled water. He accidentally dropped it. Plastic bottles rolled across the marble floor. Normally, several people would have stopped to help. Today, everyone stepped around them. Each person believed their own emergency mattered more. Micky bent down without saying a word. He gathered every bottle and handed the box back to the young man. "Thank you," the employee whispered. Micky smiled. "We're all on the same team." The young man nodded before hurrying away. Across the hall, Ethan sat beside Mrs. Reynolds in the children's reading lounge. Most of the younger children had finally calmed down. Some colored pictures, others read books. But Ethan wasn't reading. He watched the hallway through the glass door, waiting. Mrs. Reynolds noticed. "You're worried." "A little. Your dad seems like the kind of man who stays calm." "He always does," she smiled. "Then maybe you should borrow a little of that." Ethan reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around the brass compass. North. He slowly opened it. The needle settled almost instantly. "My mum used to say—" He stopped. Mrs. Reynolds waited patiently. "That when people get scared, they stop looking where they're going." She smiled gently. "Your mum sounds wise. So does my dad." Back inside the operations room, frustration was beginning to replace discipline. Engineers talked over one another. Someone rebooted a server despite being told not to. Another technician blamed the firewall vendor. A third insisted they should disconnect the entire resort from the internet. Nothing worked. Every idea arrived too late. Kevin stared at the attack timeline. Then at the maintenance logs. Then back again. Something caught his attention. Every suspicious event, every strange controller failure, every unexplained interruption, had started hours before the ransomware appeared. His stomach tightened. He remembered a conversation near the pool. The timing looked coordinated. He looked toward the hallway. Where was Micky? At that same moment, Helena walked out of the conference room. She nearly collided with Micky. "There you are." Her voice was sharp. "If you're looking for instructions, keep your staff away from the guests." "They're already doing that." "Good." She took another step, then stopped. For the first time all day, she noticed something strange. Micky wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the network activity displayed on a monitor inside the room. Not casually, carefully, like someone reading a familiar language. Helena followed his gaze. "What?" Micky answered quietly. "They're still inside." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the encryption isn't the biggest problem." Helena folded her arms. "Our cybersecurity team has this under control." Micky slowly turned toward her. "No, they don't." His voice remained calm, almost gentle. "But they will. If they stop fighting the attack, they can see and start looking for the one they can't." For the first time since meeting him, Helena had no immediate reply. Not because she believed him, because she wasn't sure anymore. Before she could say another word, Kevin came running out of the operations room. His face had gone pale. He looked directly at Micky, not at Helena, not at the general manager, at Micky. Kevin hesitated, then swallowed. "I think." He looked embarrassed. "I think I owe you an apology." Micky said nothing. Kevin took another breath. "You were right this morning. The attack started hours before we saw it." Another silence. Then Kevin asked the question he never imagined asking a pool caretaker. Would you take a look at something? Across the hallway, Helena slowly turned toward the young engineer. The request hung in the air between them. Just a few hours earlier, everyone had laughed when Micky spoke about the network. Now, the first person asking for his help was one of the engineers who had dismissed him. For 3 long seconds, nobody spoke. Kevin stood in the hallway, waiting for an answer. Around him, engineers continued rushing from one room to another, their voices blending into a wall of panic. The countdown on the ballroom screens kept moving, 2:41:18. Every second was another second closer to disaster. Micky looked at Kevin. "What do you need?" Kevin hesitated. I don't even know anymore." It was the first completely honest answer anyone had given all morning. Micky nodded once. "Then let's find out." The temporary network operations center had become almost unrecognizable. Coffee cups covered every desk. Extension cords stretched across the floor. Network diagrams filled whiteboards on every wall. Monitors displayed nothing but warnings. Red, yellow. Red again. The room smelled of stress. The moment Micky walked inside, several engineers looked up. One whispered, "Who's that?" "The pool maintenance guy." Another frowned. "What is he doing here?" Kevin answered, before anyone else could. "I asked him to help." The room fell quiet. No one argued. Not because they agreed. Because they had run out of better ideas. Micky stopped in front of the largest monitor. He didn't touch the keyboard. Not yet. He simply watched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. His eyes moved from one graph to another. Network traffic. CPU usage. Authentication logs. Domain controller status. Firewall activity. No emotion crossed his face. Only concentration. Finally, he asked a question. "When did you disconnect the East server cluster?" The IT director answered immediately. "We didn't." Micky pointed at the screen. "You did." Everyone looked. A section of the network map had quietly gone gray. No alerts. No notifications. It had simply vanished. Kevin zoomed in. Micky was right. The East cluster had stopped communicating 12 minutes earlier. No one had noticed. "How did you see that?" Kevin whispered. Micky didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. "Who authorized the automatic synchronization?" Silence. The engineers exchanged confused looks. "What synchronization?" someone asked. Micky looked at the replication dashboard. "It's still running." The IT director frowned. "That's impossible. It should have stopped when encryption began." It didn't. Everyone followed Micky's gaze. The synchronization service was still active, quietly copying encrypted files into every remaining backup location. The room went silent. One engineer suddenly turned pale. "My God, we've been infecting ourselves." Nobody had considered that possibility. Every attempt to restore the network had actually spread the damage further. Without asking permission, Micky finally sat down at the keyboard. His movements were calm, economical. Nothing was wasted. He didn't type quickly. He typed deliberately. Each command appeared only after a brief pause. He wasn't guessing. He was confirming. Kevin watched the terminal window. The commands weren't complicated. What shocked him was the order. Micky wasn't attacking the malware. He was studying its behavior. Within moments, a map began forming across one monitor. Colored lines connected different systems, building by building, server by server. One engineer blinked. "What software is that?" "It isn't software," Kevin answered quietly. "He's drawing the attack path." Micky never looked away from the screen. They entered through a temporary vendor account. He clicked once. They escalated privileges here. Another click. They disabled monitoring before launching encryption. Click. They've had administrator access for at least, he paused, 14 hours. The room became perfectly still. 14 hours. That meant the attackers had been inside the resort long before the conference had even begun. The general manager stepped into the room. So? The IT director looked at him, then looked back at Micky. Before he could answer, Micky spoke. They're professionals. The general manager frowned. I already know that. No, Micky replied calmly. You know they're criminals. I'm telling you they're disciplined. He pointed toward the attack map. They never attacked first. They observed. They learned your routines. They learned who had access. They learned what everyone ignored. He looked around the room. They've probably been watching this resort for weeks. No one interrupted, because every word matched the evidence now appearing on the screens. Outside the operations room, Helena watched through the glass. She couldn't hear every conversation, but she could see something impossible. Her IT director, the same man who had ignored everyone all morning, was taking notes while Micky spoke. Engineers who normally argued over every technical decision were now silently following his instructions. No one laughed anymore. No one smirked at the maintenance uniform. No one even seemed to notice it. Helena felt an unfamiliar sensation settle into her chest. Doubt. For the first time that day, she wondered if the man she had humiliated in front of hundreds of guests had been trying to save them all along. Inside the room, Micky stopped typing. He leaned back slightly. They're waiting. Kevin looked confused. For what? For us to panic. They expect us to start restoring backups. They expect us to reconnect infected systems. They expect us to pay. The general manager asked quietly, So, what do we do? Micky looked directly at him. We stop reacting. Silence. We make them react to us. The room remained frozen. Even the countdown seemed quieter now. 2:31:46. The IT director slowly removed his glasses. He looked at Micky for a long moment. Then, in front of every engineer in the room, he said something that surprised even himself. From this moment on, he glanced around the room. Everyone follows his lead. No one objected. Not a single person. Because in less than 20 minutes, the pool caretaker had done what an entire cybersecurity team had failed to do. He had made the chaos make sense. And somewhere, hundreds of miles away, the man behind the attack frowned for the first time that morning. One of his monitoring windows had just gone dark. Someone inside the Grand Sapphire Resort had finally made the right move. The room moved with a different kind of energy now. No one was shouting anymore. No one was guessing. Every engineer focused on the instructions Micky gave, one calm sentence at a time. Disconnect Building C. Kevin nodded. Done. Disable every scheduled replication task. Done. Physically isolate the backup appliance. Another engineer looked up, already moving. The panic that had ruled the room for nearly an hour was slowly being replaced by discipline. Not because the danger had passed, because someone had finally taken control. Outside, the countdown continued. 2:18:09. Guests were being escorted to secured areas. Some complained. Others demanded refunds. Several executives threatened legal action. Television reporters stood behind police barricades, broadcasting live. The Grand Sapphire Resort remains under what experts believe is a sophisticated cyber attack. The story had already begun spreading across social media. Helena watched through the ballroom windows. This wasn't just becoming a financial disaster. It was becoming a public one. Her phone rang. The caller ID displayed only one name: Daniel Cross, Chief Information Security Officer, Titan Nexus Technologies, one of the summit's largest sponsors. Helena answered immediately. "Daniel, I'm already in the parking lot." His voice was calm. "I heard what happened. We've lost almost everything. I'm coming upstairs." 5 minutes later, the doors to the Network Operations Center opened. A man in his early 50s entered carrying a laptop bag over one shoulder. His silver hair contrasted sharply with the navy jacket embroidered with the Titan Nexus logo. No introductions were necessary. Nearly everyone in the room recognized him. Daniel Cross had spent more than 25 years leading incident response teams through some of the largest cyber attacks in the country. If anyone outside the resort could help, it was him. The general manager hurried forward. "Mr. Cross, thank you for coming." Daniel shook his hand only briefly. "Status," the IT director answered. "Ransomware. They've encrypted production and backups. We've contained part of the spread." Daniel nodded. "Who's leading containment?" The IT director turned toward the center of the room. Daniel followed his gaze. His eyes settled on Micky. For a second, he didn't react. Then his expression changed. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. He took 2 slow steps closer. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Micky looked up from the keyboard. Their eyes met. A faint smile crossed Micky's face. "Hello, Daniel." The room fell silent. Daniel stared at him as though he was seeing a ghost. "You disappeared. I changed careers. For 3 years," Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "People have been trying to find you." Micky smiled faintly. "I wasn't hiding. I was raising my son." Nobody in the room understood what they were watching. Helena looked from one man to the other. "You know each other?" Daniel turned toward her. The disbelief in his face slowly transformed into something else. Respect. "No," he said quietly. "I know exactly who he is." He looked around the room. Then, realizing almost no one understood, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man sitting at that keyboard isn't a pool caretaker." Silence. "He built the incident response framework my company still uses." No one moved. Daniel continued. 5 years ago, when hospitals across 3 states were hit by coordinated ransomware attacks, he led the recovery. He looked at Kevin. "The procedures you've been following for the last 20 minutes came from him." Kevin's mouth slowly opened. He remembered the manuals, the flowcharts, the emergency response documents they had studied during training. Every one of them carried the initials MB. He had never known what those letters stood for. Now he did. Micky Brooks. Daniel wasn't finished. "You know why the attack stopped spreading?" No one answered. "Because he didn't fight the ransomware. He interrupted the attackers." He pointed toward the network map covering the largest monitor. "Most engineers chase encrypted files. He hunts the people controlling them." Daniel smiled. "And that's why he was always the best." The room remained perfectly still. Even the experienced IT director looked stunned. He had spent years reading papers written by experts whose names appeared at international conferences. One of those names had been standing beside the resort pool every morning, cleaning leaves, repairing filters, smiling politely at guests who never bothered to learn his name. Helena felt the blood drain from her face. Fragments of the morning replayed inside her mind. "Please stay in your lane. Leave computers to professionals. Don't offer your opinion unless someone asks." Every sentence came back. Every laugh. Every smirk. Every public humiliation. She slowly looked toward Micky. He wasn't watching her. He hadn't stopped working once. Not to defend himself. Not to prove a point. Not even after Daniel revealed the truth. He simply continued protecting people who had treated him like he didn't belong. For reasons Helena couldn't explain, that hurt far more than if he had been angry. Daniel stepped beside Micky and lowered his voice. I reviewed the attack while I was driving. Micky nodded toward the monitor. They're still connected through a hidden command channel. I saw that. Daniel looked closer, then smiled. You've already found it. I think I know where they're hiding. Daniel folded his arms. I was hoping you'd say that. Micky leaned forward and typed a final command. A new window appeared. Several encrypted connections blinked on the screen. Then one line of text appeared beneath them. Command server identified. Kevin stared at the monitor. So, he whispered, we've finally found them. Micky looked at the countdown clock. 2:03:51. No, he said calmly. They've been watching us all morning. He rested one hand on the keyboard. It's time. We started watching them. The room held its breath. For the first time since the attack began, the hunters had become the hunted. The countdown reached 1:58:12. No one in the network operations center spoke. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the monitor in front of Micky. A cluster of encrypted connections pulsed quietly across the screen. Each one represented a tunnel the attackers were still using to communicate with the resort's network. Daniel Cross folded his arms. You found their command channel. Micky nodded. I found one of them. Daniel raised an eyebrow. One? They're professionals. They never rely on a single way in. He zoomed the network map outward. Immediately, 3 additional connections appeared, hidden beneath ordinary cloud traffic. So there are 4, Kevin whispered. There were 4, Micky corrected. Now there are 3. He pressed enter. One connection disappeared. Hundreds of miles away, inside a rented warehouse, a young hacker looked up from his laptop. What? Another hacker turned toward him. What happened? We just lost Relay 1. Reconnect it. I can't. His fingers flew across the keyboard. No response. The room grew quiet. Their team leader walked over. What do you mean you can't? The young man swallowed. Someone's cutting us off. Back at the Grand Sapphire Resort, Micky never celebrated. He simply continued working. Kevin. Yes. Shut down every outbound connection except the isolated forensic network. Done. Don't reconnect anything until I tell you. Understood. The IT director watched Micky work for another minute before quietly asking, how do you know what they'll do next? Micky didn't stop typing, because if I were in their position, he highlighted another hidden tunnel. I'd already have a backup plan. He clicked once. The second command channel vanished. The lead hacker stared at his monitors. No. He immediately switched to another relay. Connection refused. Another. Dead. A fourth. Nothing. He felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty. He opened a secure chat window. Who are we dealing with? No answer. He typed again. Find out who's inside that network. Seconds later, one of his partners replied. Unknown. The team leader leaned back slowly. No, he whispered. Not unknown. He watched another encrypted tunnel disappear. Someone in there knows exactly how we work. Inside the operations room, the atmosphere had completely changed. The engineers who had spent the morning reacting to every new problem were now moving with confidence. Not because the attack was over, because they finally understood the battlefield. Every instruction from Micky had a purpose. Every action created another advantage. Even Daniel Cross had stopped offering suggestions. Instead, he observed. At one point he quietly smiled to himself. This is why they could never replace him. Kevin overheard the comment. He glanced at Micky. The maintenance uniform suddenly seemed almost invisible. All he could see now was experience. An alarm chimed. The ransomware timer froze. 1:47:36. No one touched the keyboard. Kevin looked up. It stopped. Another engineer checked the logs. They're trying to reconnect. They've lost synchronization. Daniel looked at Micky. You've disrupted their command structure. Micky nodded. They've lost visibility. The general manager frowned. What does that mean? It means... Micky replied calmly. They're blind. At that exact moment, every encrypted connection disappeared. One by one, silently. The attackers had disconnected themselves. Kevin stared at the monitor. They're gone. Micky shook his head. No. They're running. Another command appeared on his screen. Remote session terminated. The room erupted. Applause broke out. Several engineers laughed with relief. One woman covered her face and began crying. The general manager extended his hand. You did it. Micky smiled politely. Not yet. Everyone stopped celebrating. He pointed toward another monitor. The malware is still inside the network. We've only removed the people controlling it. The room settled immediately. There was still work to do. Over the next 40 minutes, Micky led the recovery one system at a time. Servers came back online in carefully controlled stages. Payment terminals restarted. Security cameras reappeared. Guest room access returned. The elevators resumed operation. When the ballroom screens finally lit up again, the ransom message was gone. In its place appeared the Grand Sapphire Resort logo. A quiet wave of applause spread through the building. Employees who had spent hours fearing the worst embraced one another. Several guests clapped openly. Others simply exhaled. The crisis was over. The general manager walked into the ballroom and addressed the remaining guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to inform you that the threat has been contained. Applause filled the room once again. He continued, before we resume today's conference, there is someone I want you to meet. He looked toward the entrance. Micky hesitated. Public attention had never interested him. Daniel gave him a gentle nudge. You've spent your whole life standing behind the work. Today, let the work stand behind you. Slowly, Micky stepped onto the stage. The audience recognized him immediately. Some remembered him cleaning the pool that morning. Others remembered Helena laughing at him. The silence inside the ballroom became almost uncomfortable. The general manager spoke clearly. This man saved our resort. He protected our guests. He protected our employees. And he did it after spending the entire morning being treated as though his voice didn't matter. No one looked at Micky. Every eye turned toward Helena. She stood near the front row, motionless. The general manager continued. Our internal security review confirmed something else. He held up a printed report. Mr. Brooks warned our staff about suspicious network activity hours before the attack. He was ignored. Another page. Witness statements also confirmed that he was publicly humiliated for trying to help. The ballroom remained silent. There was nowhere left for Helena to hide. She slowly walked toward the stage. Her confident posture from that morning was gone. She stopped in front of Micky. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Finally, I'm sorry. her voice barely carried across the room. "I judged you by your uniform." She looked down. "I embarrassed you in front of your son." She took a slow breath. "And I was wrong." Micky looked at her quietly. Then he nodded once. "I accept your apology. Nothing more. No speech. No revenge. No humiliation in return. Only dignity. Sometimes, that is the heaviest consequence of all." As Helena stepped away from the stage, the general manager addressed the audience one final time. Effective immediately, Helena Whitmore has been relieved of her duties, pending an independent investigation into her conduct and her repeated violations of our workplace respect policy. No one applauded. No one celebrated her downfall. They simply watched as she handed over her identification badge and quietly walked out of the ballroom. Near the back of the room, Ethan stood beside Mrs. Reynolds. He smiled as he looked at his father. Then he reached into his pocket, wrapped his fingers around the little brass compass named North, and whispered to himself, "I told you they didn't know who my dad was." The conference resumed at 3:15 that afternoon, not because everything had returned to normal, because people needed proof that normal was still possible. The ballroom looked different now. The decorations were the same. The stage hadn't changed. Neither had the giant LED screens. But the people had changed. Executives who had rushed past maintenance workers that morning now smiled and offered handshakes. Employees who had barely known Micky's name stopped him in the hallway just to say thank you. More than once, someone apologized. He accepted every apology with the same quiet nod, then kept walking. Inside the operations center, engineers were completing the final recovery checklist. Kevin carried a printed report toward Micky. "I thought you might want to see this." Micky glanced at the first page. Every critical system was online. No customer payment information had been stolen. No guest records had been leaked. The attackers had encrypted the network, but they had never managed to steal what they came for. Kevin smiled. "We're calling it a complete recovery." Micky handed the report back. "No." Kevin looked confused. "It's a successful recovery. A complete recovery happens when people learn something." Kevin stood quietly for a moment. "I think we did." Daniel Cross joined them a few minutes later. He carried a thin black folder. "I've been on the phone all afternoon." Micky smiled. "I figured." Daniel handed him the folder. Inside was a formal employment offer. Executive Vice President of Global Incident Response, Titan Nexus Technologies. An annual salary that exceeded 7 figures. Complete executive benefits. Equity. A signing bonus. Daniel folded his arms. "I had authorization to offer you anything you wanted. You could build your own team. Choose your own people. Work from anywhere." He paused. "The industry never stopped talking about you." Micky closed the folder. "It means a lot." Daniel waited. "But," Micky smiled, "I'm not looking for my old life." Daniel laughed softly. "I knew that was coming. You still had to ask." "I did." The two men shook hands. Not as strangers, as old colleagues who understood each other without needing many words. "If you ever change your mind," Daniel said, "you know where to find me." Micky nodded. "And if you ever need advice." Daniel laughed. "I'll probably be the one calling you." Late that afternoon, the general manager requested one final meeting. Only a handful of people attended. The executive board. Department directors. Micky. The general manager stood. "I owe you an apology." He looked directly at Micky. "I failed to listen. I allowed assumptions to replace judgment." He slid another document across the table. This isn't another job offer. Micky opened it. The resort wanted him to become its director of cybersecurity. He smiled politely. I appreciate the confidence. But I'd like to make a different proposal. The executives listened. I'll help redesign your security systems. I'll train your IT staff. I'll create your emergency response procedures. He paused. But only as a consultant. The general manager looked surprised. You don't want the position? Micky smiled. I already have a full-time job. Several people looked confused. Then he glanced toward the glass wall overlooking the courtyard, where Ethan sat outside reading a book. My son's waiting. A quiet smile spread across the room. No one asked another question. They understood. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when Micky finally clocked out. The resort had grown quiet again. Emergency vehicles were gone. Television crews had packed their equipment. Guests wandered peacefully through the gardens, as though the day had been nothing more than an unusual story they would tell later. Ethan ran across the courtyard the moment he saw his father. So, he said with a grin. You really fixed everything. Micky laughed. A lot of people fixed it. But they all listened to you. Micky wrapped an arm around his son's shoulder. Nobody solves something that big alone. They walked slowly toward the infinity pool. The water reflected the orange glow of the evening sky. The same pool where Micky had been quietly removing leaves that morning. It felt like days ago. They sat together at the edge of the empty deck. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Ethan reached into his pocket and took out the small brass compass. North. He opened it carefully. The needle spun once, then settled. He smiled. I think Mum would have been proud today. Micky looked across the water. I think so too. Ethan studied the compass for another moment. You know, when everyone was laughing at you, I wanted to tell them who you really were. Micky looked at him. What stopped you? Ethan shrugged. I remembered what you always say. What do I always say? The truth introduces itself. Micky smiled. It usually does. Ethan closed the compass. So, is that why you never told anyone? Micky nodded slowly. When people only respect you because of your title, they're respecting the title. Not you. He gently tapped the compass resting in Ethan's hand. This always points north. It doesn't care who's holding it. It doesn't care how much money they have. It doesn't care what clothes they're wearing. It simply points where it's supposed to. He looked at his son. Be like that. Know who you are. And never let someone else's opinion change your direction. Ethan slipped the compass back into his pocket. I won't. As they walked toward the parking lot, dozens of employees waved goodbye. Some thanked Micky again. Others simply smiled. Respect no longer came because people had learned about his past. It came because they had witnessed his character. The maintenance uniform hadn't changed. The man wearing it never had. Only the way people chose to see him. The camera slowly pulled back. Father and son walked side by side beneath the fading evening light, one carrying a worn maintenance toolbox, the other carrying a small brass compass named North. Neither of them was in a hurry, because they already knew exactly where they were going. If this story reminded you that true worth is revealed through character, not appearances, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You never know who the quietest person in the room really is.